Hello and welcome to this edition of the Potomac Local Podcast. I am Uriah Kaiser, publisher of Potomac Local. Joining me on the podcast today is Joe Stainsby. Joe is the Vanpool Alliance Program Manager with OmniRide. Joe, thanks for coming on the podcast today.
It's my absolute pleasure. I look forward to talking with you.
Joe, what you do is you help commuters not only get to work, but you also help them find vanpools, which essentially, for the most part, takes cars off the road. So if you would, please just give our listeners an overview of what it is that you're tasked to do every day to help with what is one of the worst commuting regions in the entire country.
Yeah, certainly. I'd be happy to. So, Vanpool Alliance is a data gathering and incentive program that was set up in 2013 by three regional bodies. Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, which is the close-in counties, and then the George Washington Regional Commission, that being the southern counties,
Fredericksburg, right.
So forth. And it was put together to essentially help solve this problem. There were vanpools in the area, vanpools being basically giant carpools. You have to have a minimum of 4 people in a 7-passenger van, all the way up to 15 people in a 15-passenger van. And I was brought in essentially to improve the amount of vehicles out there on the road, and then also, for want of a better expression, to monetize those vehicles. We take the data that those vehicles report on a monthly and annual basis, their trips, who's on the vehicle, so on and so forth. And we report that information to the National Transit Database through the FTA, and that then generates federal transit dollars back to the region in the amount of about $5 or $6 million annually. Since the program started at the very end of 2013, we have about 650 active enrolled vans in the program.
That's a lot of vans, 650. That's a big number.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's we average about 130,000 to 140,000 passenger trips a month, which, just to give some kind of local reference, is actually more than some local bus systems. It's more than the Q in Fairfax. It's not dissimilar to Dash in Alexandria. So vanpools move a lot of people through the area. It's just that a lot of people don't necessarily know about it because, of course, the 140,000 trips we have are with 54 different vanpool companies. Everything from mom and pop shops who just run 1 and 2 vans that nobody's heard of, all the way up to very large vendors like Enterprise Rent-A-Car, who have several hundred vans that participate in the program.
So you work with both companies like you said, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, right up to mom and pops, essentially entrepreneurs, right? Who are
exactly
starting their own businesses, sort of transporting people. And these carpools, if I would, if I live in Woodbridge, or I live in Manassas, or I live in Stafford or Fredericksburg, if I wanted to join them, how do I sign up?
Okay, so if you're interested in joining, the best thing to do is to go to our website, which is www.vanpoolalliance.org, or you can call us directly, 703-580-6169. We have all of the information on the vans in the area. And the really great thing about that is, in the past, if you wanted to really assess what vehicles were going from Woodbridge to the Pentagon, you'd have to call around all these different companies. But we are now the clearinghouse for that information. And so you can either speak to me, or if you don't want to speak to me, you can check it out on our website, and you can find out exact timings, and most importantly, for the average person, the exact cost. You can find out all of the costing information on vanpools, because there is somewhat of a sliding scale there, depending on how new the van is, how far you're going, so on and so forth. And
so let's talk about the cost, because I know that's something that's on someone's mind, and for people who may be considering this, for people who are new to this, we're familiar with the cost to ride VRE. We're familiar with the fare box on OmniRide buses. Is this something similar to that?
It's similar in the sense that vanpooling is also considered transit. So if you work for the federal government or you're lucky enough to work for a private company that provides a monthly transit benefit, it also applies to vanpooling. Now, there is no fare box or anything like that on a van, so you simply have the money, your transit benefit allocated via smart benefits directly to your vendor. Okay, you pay for your vanpools monthly. They are paid for monthly, and you buy your seat on the van monthly. And that's even if you don't necessarily ride 5 days a week. You only ride 4. Your fare is basically covering that purchase of that seat. The average fare that we have for vanpools that participate in the program is $175 a month. But to give you a kind of obscene, ridiculous end of the spectrum's examples, you might be paying as low as $100 a month if you're on a vanpool that goes from Springfield to Arlington, or you might be paying as high as $300 a month if you're on one of those vanpools that unbelievably we have in the program that comes from Newport News and goes to DC. And so they run about 500 miles a day. So understandably, that's a significantly more expensive vanpool.
Wow, that's it's interesting to know that you have vanpools that come away as far away from Hampton Roads, and so you also say that it's primarily subsidized by the federal government, right? And that is how the business. And again, using the example that you put out, enterprise rent-a-car or the entrepreneur mom and pop, that's how they get paid, and I assume that's how they use those funds to keep their vans on the road.
Yeah, so there's actually a couple of different revenue streams. The one that you completely clearly identify is the flat-out fares that the people pay to ride the vehicle. Okay. Then the other revenue stream is if they are enrolled in our program, we incentivize them reporting data to us by making a monthly payment to them. We pay them either $200 or $400 a month, depending on a couple of different factors, but largely speaking, it's depending on how new the people are on the van are to vanpooling. So if they've been in a van before, so we're not necessarily getting a mode switch from them, that group would only get $200 a month. But if they're all coming from single occupancy vehicles, we will pay that group $400 a month.
And a single occupancy vehicle, of course, are people who choose to drive by themselves, drive alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's really where we take from. You know, we are not interested in ever taking from carpools, bus service, VRE, any of that. We are trying to get mode change, and it's one of the biggest things when I talk to people is even if you are not personally interested in vanpooling, you should really be in favor of vanpooling, because the more people that use vanpools, the less congested the roads are for everybody, right? You know, it's trite to say it, but a 15-passenger van takes 14 vehicles off the road, right? And you just multiply that up, especially when you consider, you know, I think we have, 650, 660 active vanpools in our program. They're not all 15-passenger vans. I think the average capacity is about 10, right? But we are taking thousands and thousands and thousands of vehicles. And again, not just off the roads, but off the most congested roads that we have here in the Commonwealth. Crossing the 95 on the Occoquan or anything like that. I mean, it really does help through those corridors.
I just got back from a vacation in Portland, Oregon, and when I go visit other cities in the U.S., I always talk about slugging, right? And because it's so unique to Northern Virginia and where we live, and once people try to wrap their head around it, once people who aren't familiar with it, and you tell them that you're riding with a stranger, then they really sort of put their backs up because they don't really understand why anyone would get in a car with a stranger. But you just have to experience it and live here and know the congestion that we have in Northern Virginia to know how well the slugging system works. So who, I guess the question then, who is driving these vans that you're putting people in?
Excellent question, you're right. So Vanpools, what crucially legally separates them from being shuttles is that the vehicles are driven by the commuters themselves, right? So the trip, whether the people are on the van, that is really incidental to the trip occurring. And this is what makes vanpooling so attractive for that entrepreneurial element, because they might be living in Lake Ridge and driving to a job at the Pentagon every day, and they already have a vehicle that will be compliant for the program, so they just need to find a few other people to ride with them, and then they can become legally a Vanpool, and they can get all the benefits that are entitled with that. So all of the people on a Vanpool are going to the place of work, and that's another thing that makes it that much more efficient, because you're not paying a driver or anything like that.
And so is there a limit? Have you ever found a point where you're maxed out in terms of bandwidth? You have enough, you have more people wanting to get on board than you have seats for in vans, or is it the other way around? Do you ever experience these types of issues?
Yeah, I think it would be very similar to OmniRide bus service as well, in the sense that there are certain routes which are going to be very, very in demand, and there are wait lists for vans and this, that, and the other. And there are other places where the van is only ever going to have 4 out of the 7 seats filled, and it's never going to get beyond that because there isn't the demand. So it really does depend very much on the corridor specific types of capacities. Through our website, you have the ability to see all of the vans that we have operating in the program and see if they do have available seats. And even if they don't, you can waitlist yourself for that van, which then alerts the van that someone is looking to get onto that van. So you don't constantly have to keep going back and pinging it. Once you create a profile, you're in there for good.
I assume that most of your popular, most heavily used routes are from the suburbs in Prince William, in Stafford, in Fredericksburg, King George, where have you, into the core, right? DC, right? Arlington, Crystal City.
That is exactly correct. Yes.
Okay. And so as we've seen the proliferation of express lanes onto 495, and we're seeing an extension of the 95 express lanes to almost Fredericksburg City, where do you see the future growth of traffic patterns or that Vanpoolers might use in the future? Will it always be highly centralized in the core, or do you see opportunities for new traffic patterns?
I mean, there's definitely going to be opportunities for new traffic patterns. I will say that personally, I think that the extension of the 95 express lanes is simply going to push the end point for Vanpools away from Fredericksburg to down truly into Spotsylvania and south of that, because people will be able to access the express lanes earlier and still maintain a quasi-reasonable time to work. Vanpooling has been in existence on that 94 corridor for 30, 40 years and is a very mature market at this point. I think the only place that you're really going to see a big mode shift at this point in time is going to be, for Prince William County, is going to be on the western side of the county. Mm-hmm. Out on 66, when you're going from an old facility with a non-dedicated, so no Jersey barrier HOV lane, to now full-on bi-directional HOV and express lanes. That is where there can be that culture change.
So let's get into that. You mentioned the 66 project, and before we go to 66, we've had high occupancy vehicles now express toll lanes on. We've had these sorts of lanes, these commuter Vanpool lanes on 95, since the 70s. It's nothing new for I-95, but on 66. This is truly, and you mentioned that they are building new separated lanes that will be for slugging, commuters, busting, and they will also be tolled. And the way it's laid out outside the Beltway, we're going to have a separate facility going east and a separate facility going west. And so it's really, for the first time, going to open up new opportunities for a place historically where slugging and bus ridership has not been as high as it's been in places along 95. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. And the main reason for that along 66 was obviously, of course, the lack of the dedicated HOV lanes, but also on 95, you've got these huge park and ride lots with dedicated access, like Horner Road or places like that, 123 lot. You don't have that on 66, and those are getting built out as part of this 66 project. So it will make the ability to rideshare, to take transit, it will make that exponentially easier than it is today. And because, of course, as any of your listeners knows around here, the tolls, when you're not in an HOV compliant vehicle, the tolls are quite expensive at certain times, right? So,
as much as $40 inside the beltway, we've seen that, and that's been the topic of many news stories that we've written, and we can see the tolls, they are increased by the number of cars that are actually in the lane. So in a sense, the more cars that are in the lanes, the higher the toll is going to be.
right.
But Vanpool, but I think it's also important to note that commuters with 3 or more occupants in their cars, if they have that E-ZPass Flex, they don't pay, right? They're essentially riding for free if they've had that E-ZPass Flex.
That is absolutely correct, and so I feel that those tolls, will only further fuel the flames for people to be able to take Vanpools, because you don't always have people who live near where fixed route transit is. The advantage of a Vanpool in some circumstances is that you personally, you set the schedule, you set the route. You can meet at your house, you meet at the local Walmart, you meet where you want to do. It gives you agency. Now, some people prefer to just get on something and have it be prescribed, and they live near where the bus picks up or the train, and this all works great. But particularly as you go further west on 66, as you get out past, Haymarket, the Plains, Front Royal, any of these locations, there's a big lack of transit in those areas, and that's where vanpooling can really help.
You talk about setting the schedule and sort of going at your own pace. I assume you have to sort of coordinate with the 6 other members of your Vanpool, but I imagine that it has its advantages, and I'm sitting here wondering, well, why would I choose to ride a bus or catch a train when I have to be at a certain fixed point when I can sort of set my own time frame and go into work when I need to go into work, and vanpooling does that. Is vanpooling though more expensive because of that luxury? Talk about the price differences that we might see if one is considering switching over from riding the OmniRide bus or Virginia Railway Express to a vanpool.
Right. I mean, I would say, just the caveat I would say first is that typically those are going to be 2 very different markets, and people are not cross-shopping between those 2. But I will say that generally speaking, vanpooling is extremely cost competitive to other modes, and one of the main reasons for that is that you're not paying a driver, right? So because you're not paying a driver, you don't have the benefits and the hourly wage and this, that, and the other. So vanpooling does tend to be somewhat cheaper. So our average fare is about $170 a month, which is certainly a lot less expensive than a VRE ticket or something like that. But generally speaking, people who want to take the bus and want to take the train, they want a certain amount of space that you get in a bigger vehicle like that. They want to be able to have USB charge points at every point, and you're not necessarily going to get that in a van. So they're looking for somewhat different things. And ultimately with a Vanpool, of course, because it is driven by the commuters themselves, you might get lucky and have some wonderful individual on your van who loves nothing better than to drive 24/7, 365. But what happens on a lot of vans is you might have to drive 1 day a week or something like that. And whilst that looks pretty good to someone coming out of a mind-melting commute on 95 in their personal vehicle, that doesn't necessarily look so appealing to someone wishing past it on an OmniRide bus or on VRE. So it's kind of a horses for courses type thing. So vanpooling is very price competitive, but we do find it's extremely rare that someone comes to vanpooling from another mode of transit, which is actually great, and that's how we want it.
Is it your job to get more people? Obviously, it is your job to get more people out of their cars and into Vanpools, to stop driving alone. But is it also your job on the entrepreneurial aspect of it, which I find very interesting, to get more vans on the road? And when we talk about the demand, is there a demand for both more riders and more vans?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer to that is yes. When we started this program, we were working with, I think, 25 different Vanpool companies, and most of them were big. We now are well into the mid-50s, and most of them are small. The monthly payment that Vanpool Alliance makes helps lower that bar for entry for the entrepreneur. And certainly, a lot of people have taken advantage of that within the county. A lot of our new Vanpool companies that have formed are based in Prince William County, based in Stafford County. So, we are always interested in giving the consumer more choice, because that makes the marketplace as competitive as humanly possible. And it also makes it the most resilient to change.
But you also mentioned that the difference between a Vanpool and a shuttle would mean that the Vanpool driver is actually also going to work, and they're going to spend the day at the office. At the end of the day, they're going to take that same van home, whether they may not drive, but they will ride the same van. If someone says, I'm going to be smart, I'm going to buy a van, I'm going to go on social media, advertise a Vanpool, and start collecting federal money, and I'm going to drop people off at their office, and I'll go back at 5 o'clock and pick them up. Does it work like that?
It does if you call yourself a shuttle. So that with a shuttle, the driver's presence is not incidental to the trip. He is making the trip to take people, right? Very similar to how a bus does, and that very clearly makes it not a Vanpool. The way that entrepreneurs typically get into this is that they are working a job at a federal agency, and they're going to continue to do that. But they're just setting up a Vanpool company, and they continue to use their vehicle. So they'd be driving to work one way or the other. The difference is now they're going to have 3, 4, 5 other people in the vehicle with them, and so they're operating as a Vanpool. So that is a very, very crucial distinction.
Can you talk to me more about the OmniRide's goals, Vanpool Alliance, their goals for the future of Vanpools in our region? Do you have numbers that you've set in terms of conversions from single occupancy drivers to Vanpool riders, the number of vans you might one day see on the road? Talk to me about the future of what you see.
Okay, so we, at this point, we do not have defined goals in terms of a numeric level beyond that which we currently achieved. When the program started, we needed to ensure that we generated more revenue than it cost to run the program. We have directly put about $5.5 million directly back into the local economy through the $200 and $400 monthly payments that we make. And the program, as it stands right now, generates about $5 to $6 million a year in revenue. So we have by far and away exceeded that goal. In terms of the future, I am tasked with growing the program every year, something which, touch wood, I've been able to do. But really, we don't have a specific growth strategy. The Northern Virginia is a fully mature market, and I think our ongoing business plan is much more of shepherding the existing flock, essentially, as opposed to fully growing it. Now, no one really knows precisely what's going to happen on 66, but if you see, as I said, we have 650 odd vans enrolled in the program now, of which about 450 use 95. If so, you don't have to be a genius to see that if something big happens on 66 and we are able to change that SOV culture, that 600 vans in the program could quite conceivably become 1,000 vans in the program. And that's a win-win for everyone, especially the region, because that would just potentially generate a lot more federal funding.
Yeah, it stands to reason that you could presumably double the number of vans that you have and double the number of participants that you have in your program just because of the I66 project. And it's also very interesting to me that you did mention that commuters are coming up from Hampton Roads, so they may be paying $300 a month to do so. But I imagine, and they're using I-95 on 66. I imagine the expansion of that highway could open up the transit shed for commuters from Front Royal or people in West Virginia even to come out and do that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, there are some troopers that do it and have been doing it, but all it's going to do is increase your people from Winchester, your Harper's Ferries, your Martinsburgs. We have, maybe 10 or 20 of those vans right now. It would be entirely possible to see that, tick up to 75, 100, because, as they're coming in, traffic starts to get bad when you get to Haymarket, and they'll be able to jump right on the HOV and go straight into town as if the traffic wasn't there. So, yeah, I think it does increase the commuter shed and the transit bubble around DC becomes, probably that much bigger, which you can, I guess, debate how great that is.
It's very, very large. It's never ending. It seems as the highways and the commute go. Joe, remind our listeners one more time if they want to get involved, if they want to find out more information about vanpooling with Vanpool Alliance, what should they do?
If they want to find out more, they can visit us online at vanpoolalliance.org, or they can call us directly, 703-580-6169, and we'll be happy to talk to them about starting a vanpool, finding a vanpool, or we can direct them to any other bus train services they might like.
Joe Stainsby is the Vanpool Alliance Program Manager for Vanpool Alliance. I really appreciate you coming on the Potomac Local Podcast today and telling us more about the program that you're building there.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And that's it for this edition of the Potomac Local Podcast. We'll see you next time.